takeout. This is CBS News again. I'm doing double CBS. I just can't get enough of that Barry Weiss, I guess. So we're gonna watch this one. This is Graham Platner. I think this is just an interview with him. I think that he's doing pretty good in Maine for his Senate race. So this is called Maine Senate candidate Platner on his double-digit primary lead. We're going to continue pushing, is what it says. So let's go ahead and see what our favorite Antifa super soldier, former Reddit edgelord, current Antifa super soldier, Platner has to say in this interview.
Welcome back to The Takeout. A series of new polls show progressive Democrat Graham Platner with a double-digit, you heard that right, double-digit lead in Maine's Senate primary over Governor Janet Mills. We are joined now by Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine, Graham Platner. Graham, it's good to have you on the program. I appreciate you taking the time. Let me just ask you straight up, do you believe the primary contest with you and the governor is effectively over?
I'm not. Look, I'm definitely coming at this from the perspective of somebody who is not in politics. I was an oyster farmer full time up until August of last year. And, I'm engaged in a political primary against the sitting governor who has a lot of support from the political establishment. And so for me, there's kind of, we're going to continue pushing forward the way we've been pushing forward regardless. And in some ways, what's lucky for us is that the kind of campaign that we've built, which is so focused on organizing and so focused on being out all around the state, talking to people directly, it essentially looks the same whether or not we're in a primary or we aren't. It's this exact strategy that I think is going to build the power to beat Susan Collins come November. And we're just going to continue moving on with that.
Because it has been written that internally your campaign is really not focused on the governor anymore and is girding for a general election campaign. Is that true?
I mean, it would be true in the sense that we're just continuing to build exactly what we've been building. The electoral strategy to beat Susan Collins, in my opinion, needs to be one that is focused on engaging with Mainers directly, which means field organizing, means going out into communities and holding very public town halls, being very accessible to people. That strategy is what we've been doing since August, and we're going to continue doing exactly that. And so we haven't shifted anything, I'll be entirely honest. We're just continuing to put our energy and our time into building out that exact same kind of
stuff. This is the stuff that I don't care that much about these questions. I'm hoping they get to some better questions for him after this, but
strategy. And we're going to keep doing it after the primary once we win. But it's going to continue looking essentially like what we're building right now.
Looking ahead to the general election, a spokesperson for the Republican Senatorial Committee said, and I quote, "As Maine's Democrat base turns to the radical liar Graham Platner, Schumer, meaning Chuck Schumer's dream of beating Susan Collins, is slipping further out of sight." How do you respond to that?
What?
A, that you're a liar, that you're a radical, and that hopes of beating Susan Collins with you leading the Democratic ticket is slipping further out of sight.
Well, I fully expect the Republican Party to say as many awful and slanderous things about me as possible. It's important to remember this is the party that said Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States, and that also tried to swift boat John Kerry. So I don't expect good behavior out of the Republicans come the general. That being said, they should read the polling. We've got a lot of consistent polling. I think at this point we're up to 12 consecutive polls, which always show my candidacy beating Susan Collins at significantly higher margins.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like, they're just wish casting. They do this a lot in Republican circles where they really try to like pretend like left populism is somehow not like incredibly popular with like the majority of people. Like they try to pretend like moderate corporate centrist Democrat is like somehow a more electable position than like left populist. And obviously the reason that they're doing that is to try to get people I think they're aiming that generally towards Democratic primary voters to get them to be scared of voting for Graham Platner, because they know what we know. And they like, if Graham Platner is actually like the easier candidate for the Republicans to defeat, then they wouldn't say anything. They would just be like, okay, let's just let him win or whatever. What they're trying to do is they're trying to change it so that Graham Platner doesn't win because they think it would be easier to defeat, the corporate centrist Dem that Schumer picked or whatever, as opposed to a left populist. And they do that sort of stuff all the time. Once you see the pattern, it's really hard to unsee it.
Than Chuck Schumer's pick. So, I'm a Democrat in Maine. I'm wary of polling, but there is a consistency to it that engenders a bit of confidence.
Graham,
Yeah, and generally, I think a lot of people understand at this point that left populism, if you want to talk about like what independents or even like conservative, even like conservatives, like what they prefer if they were going to choose between, like, say, Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer, right? Where Bernie Sanders is objectively the more left candidate. Like they are, like Bernie Sanders is like the more radical left candidate, and Chuck Schumer is the more centrist corporate Democrat. If you ask most Republicans which they would vote for if they had to choose between those two, I think most of them would say Bernie Sanders. Same with most independents. I think most of them would say Bernie Sanders. And like, I think that's all you really need to know about like what is actually more electable. Like, I'm glad we're finally moving past this idea that the Schumer-backed, corporate-backed Democratic candidate is always like inherently more electable or whatever. That was always a lie, but it took people a long time to actually finally understand that it was a lie.
there have been a lot of things said about you, things you have written on Reddit, a tattoo you had, and a controversy around that. And I want to ask you
this Reddit edgelord phase. It's coming back, guys. I don't know.
this because I don't think it's been put to you this.
I hope that I never have I hope I never run for office and then my edgelord phase gets brought back into the limelight. That wouldn't be good. Luckily for me, I was never a Reddit guy, so all of my edgelordiness existed purely in the realm of reality in an era where not everything was being recorded all the time. And so I think that my edgelord nature, for the most part, died, like, is no longer visible. I don't think anyone can really find it if I had to guess, but I don't know. There's probably something out there if people looked hard enough.
Tattoo you had and a controversy around that. And I want to ask you this because I don't think it's been put to you this way before. Is there anything you've done or said that you regret that did not come from the stresses you internalized from post-traumatic stress itself? That is to say, is PTSD the explanation for everything, or did you also just make some additional human errors that you want to explain or contextualize?
This seems like a leading question. He's basically asking, do you blame every one of your problems on your PTSD? Which is like kind of a dumb question because like, mental illnesses and like PTSD, which is a disorder, like it's something that is imposed upon you, something that you don't necessarily control. They all play into things, but you can't ever say that something you did was 100% your disorder or 100% you. It's always a mixture of both. Once you have a disorder, that's just the way it is. You're not like able to turn it on or off like a light switch. So this is kind of a silly question. We'll see how he handles it though.
Yeah, I'll be upfront. I've never laid the entire fault of my previous opinions at earlier parts of my life at the feet of only post-traumatic stress. I mean, when I left the military, I came out of a hyper-masculine, hyper-violent place. I did 4 tours in the infantry. We have a crude sense of humor in the infantry. We certainly have I would say, narrow view of a lot of topics. And that colored my opinions and my beliefs. Once I left and came out and interacted in the civilian world with lots of different people with very different experiences than my own, many of those beliefs and thoughts and even just language changed significantly over time. I didn't have some of those. I mean, some of that was not because of my combat service, but much of it was because of the culture I had come out of. And over the years in between, I've met a lot more people, had a lot more experiences, learned a lot more about the world, and my opinions have changed with it.
Yeah. That's a decent answer. That's good. And I'm always like willing to accept people if they show real growth. Even like former hogs. I don't mind. I don't mind having people like if they can actually prove to me that they have changed and that they don't harbor some of their terrible thoughts that they had or whatever back in the day, or at least like they are you know they have done the actions that are necessary for me to trust that they have actually changed and aren't just rhetorically trying to trick me or something. um I think that he has enough of a history now since his his edgelord Reddit days, and his like Totenkopf tattoo days, which I kind of believe that one might have just been a mistake. Like everybody, I think that was one of those situations where everybody in the military was getting a Nazi tattoo, and he just didn't know what it was and just got it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I trust Graham Platner at this point that he's actually made the changes, and if he proves me wrong, then I'll just I don't I'm not gonna be there defending him if he proves me wrong. But yeah.
You have said recently that 2 Supreme Court justices deserve to be impeached. Which ones?
Well, he's lucky he just said that. I think they deserve a little bit more than that.
Well, actually, my language is that if we held Supreme Court justices to the same ethics standards that we hold all other federal judges, there's a compelling case for the impeachment and removal of at least 2. And that would be Thomas and Alito. Their relationships with billionaires, their almost blatant corruption at this point, I think is very worthy of investigation and looking into with the same ethics standards that we hold every other judge to.
You've also said, if I have this correct, that Supreme Court justices should serve only 18 years, not lifetime appointments. Do I have that right?
Yes, I'm very much for term limits for Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, me too.
I think
let me ask.
lifeline.
I think most people are like most normal people understand that like giving people like unlimited power for their entire lives is not like the best idea.
Let me ask you about this. In that sense, Ruth Bader Ginsburg served on the court for 27 years.
Yeah, she
Thurgood
shouldn't have.
Marshall, 24 years. Earl Warren, 16 years. But Earl Warren went on the record after retiring from the court saying he wished he never had, that he should have stayed on the court to preserve the court's orientation that he saw, which was a liberal/progressive one, as Chief Justice. So with that as context, and I imagine you think those are all 3 substantially important justices in the history of the Supreme Court, why 18 years?
Yes. Because I think that lifetime appointments are inherently undemocratic.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
And one of my issues with kind of structures is that you wind up with situations where you can always point to it and say, well, if it would have been good because of these very specific people that were in it. And that could be true. But other times we find ourselves with not like we don't always have the Warren Court. And I do think that
Well, and also just think about it this way. What does this encourage, right? This sort of idea of of lifetime appointments encourages people to strategically retire or strategically die, I guess, or strategically not retire in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's case, where she like stayed on and died in the court in order to give a conservative majority or whatever, like, I mean, I'm not saying she did it intentionally, but that was the outcome of her narcissism. And so like you just get all of these situations where people are just like planning and strategically trying to decide whether they should stay on or retire or not. If it was just a fixed 18 years and that was that, then that would definitely get like rid of a lot of those situations. And really, I think it should be I was just thinking every president or something nominates 2 or something, like every 4 years, you add 2 to the court, remove 2 from the court, something like that. Like, then you just get a constant rotation. Maybe it doesn't have to be the president or whatever our normal judicial process for getting judges is. But something like that would also be good. So that way you just get constant, they keep up with the times. Like you get more new blood every 4 to 6 years, however, whatever cadence we want to do it. And yeah, and then we don't also have to be stuck with a court that is ideologically one way for life, essentially, for like your entire lifetime, which is like very demoralizing in the age of like the era of the internet where things move a mile a minute. Like, yeah.
In term limits, in structural impediments to people staying forever, and allowing far more significant input from the the elected bodies of our government, whether it be the executive or the legislative, that is inherently a more democratic outcome. And I'm always kind of looking for structural fixes to make our democracy more democratic.
Before I let you go, since this is Artemis 2 Day, Graham, if you're in the Senate and you had to choose or prioritize, as sometimes you're going to ask to be doing when it comes to budgets and spending, what's more important to you, Medicare for all or future NASA missions to the moon and Mars?
What a silly question. Medicare for all, obviously, but also like you're missing the one big one, the one that is everything, the military. The military is like 90% of our budget. It's like insane. I mean, it's not that much, but it is a significant portion. It's like $1 trillion a year or something. Like it's crazy.
Medicare for all.
Not close?
Good answer.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Providing health care to Americans, giving people good lives full of dignity and fulfillment, that comes before.
Well, it's also like a priority thing. Like that one's going to save lives. Like NASA is something cool to do once we fix our like once people's material conditions are uplifted so they're not like dying homeless on the street, Like NASA is something, yeah, I love space exploration. I would love to have a government funded space program. But like we really need to get, we need to fix our own planet first, I think, before we start, or at least our own country, before we put a bunch of resources into that. Personally, that's my personal opinion.
Or anything else, in my opinion.
But also just remember, the military is bigger than everything else combined. That's the easy place to pull a bunch of money and get, get a ton of funding from.
Graham Platner.
Okay, I blathered probably a little too long on that one, but